The night my sister called me a burden, I was sitting in my car in the Costco parking lot in Mississauga, eating a granola bar for dinner because I'd worked through lunch and forgotten to stop. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail and drove home in peace. But it was my sister, and you know how it is. You always pick up for family. You think you have to. Mom wants everyone over Saturday, she said. No hello. Family dinner, it's important. How important? Important enough that you need to actually show up, not cancel last minute like you always do. I didn't argue. I said okay and finished my granola bar in the dark. I should tell you something about my family first, so you understand what I walked into that Saturday. My parents immigrated from Trinidad to Toronto in the late 90s. My dad worked in logistics for 20 years. My mum cleaned houses and offices and, later, managed the admin for a physiotherapy clinic in Brampton. They were not wealthy people, but they were proud people, and they built something solid, a semi-detached in Etobicoke. 2 kids through university, a small piece of the life they'd come here for. My sister is 5 years older than me. Her name is Renee. She married a man named Gordon when she was 29, moved to a newer build in Oakville, and from that point forward seemed to operate as though she'd graduated from our family rather than simply expanded it. She talked about Oakville the way people talk about a country they defected to. She had opinions about school districts. She used the word curated to describe her kitchen renovation. I'm not bitter about any of that. I want to be clear. People grow and change and build different lives. That's fine. What I'm telling you about is something else entirely. I was 31 that year. I owned a mobile pet grooming business, 2 vans, a booking app, a loyal client base mostly in Etobicoke, Mississauga, and the West End of Toronto. I'd started it at 27 with $8,000 I'd saved working at a vet clinic, and by my 3rd year I was pulling in just over $200,000 in revenue. By year 4, I'd hired 2 part-time groomers, expanded into a 3rd van, and signed a contract with a small pet hotel chain for weekly grooming days. I wasn't a millionaire, but I was doing well. Quietly, steadily, genuinely well. My family did not know this. Not because I hid it exactly, more because no one asked. When I came to dinners, my sister talked about Gordon's job in commercial real estate and their renovation and their son's hockey league. My parents asked if I was eating enough and if I had a boyfriend. My business came up the way a hobby comes up. How's the dog thing going? And I say fine, it's going well, and then we'd move on. I drove to my parents' house that Saturday in October. The leaves were just starting to turn on their street. My mum had made pilau and macaroni pie, and there was rum cake on the counter, and it smelled exactly like every Sunday of my childhood, and for a moment I stood in the doorway just breathing it in, thinking maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe this was just dinner. Then I saw Gordon at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. Gordon is a specific type of man, the type who says, at the end of the day a lot, and never finishes the sentence. The type who shakes your hand like he's trying to win something. He had his reading glasses on and his laptop open, and he looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as prepared. "Hey, there she is," he said, "the entrepreneur." He said entrepreneur the way people say amateur. My sister kissed me on the cheek. My mum started fixing me a plate I hadn't asked for. My dad was in the living room watching the Raptors pre-season. Everything felt almost normal, almost warm, and I told myself I was being paranoid. We ate. Gordon talked about interest rates. My mom told a story about a woman at the clinic who'd complained about her invoice 3 times. My dad laughed at something on TV. I ate 2 servings of macaroni pie and started to relax. Then my sister cleared her throat. "So," she said, "we wanted to talk to you about something, as a family." I put my fork down. "Gordon has been looking into some things. About your business." She paused. "We're worried about you." "You're worried about my business?" "We're worried about you," she repeated, like the distinction mattered. Gordon opened the folder. I did some research, he said, based on what you've shared over the years. And look, I know you don't share much, but based on what I've pieced together, mobile grooming is a tough market, high overhead, fuel costs, equipment, insurance, liability if a dog gets hurt. He tilted his head. And you're running it solo basically, with no business background? I have 3 vans and 2 employees, I said. Right, which means payroll. Payroll is a pressure point. Gordon, I looked at him. What is this? My sister reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her nails were perfectly shaped. She'd gotten them done recently. We think the business might be in trouble, she said, and we think you might not want to admit it because you're proud. Which we understand. We do. But Mum and Dad are getting older, and if something happens to you financially, it affects everyone. My mother, to her credit, looked slightly uncomfortable. My father had turned off the TV and come to stand in the doorway. What kind of trouble? I asked. My voice was very calm. I've always gone calm when I'm actually angry. People mistake it for agreement. Gordon cleared his throat. The thing is, your parents have some equity in this house. Not a lot, but enough that if managed properly, it could serve as a buffer for the family. And with your father's pension coming up, we want to make sure that money is protected, not exposed to any business risk from outside. He paused. We've drafted something. A simple agreement. It would put the house equity in a family trust, co-managed by Renee and me, and it would also include a clause that limits any financial liability from third-party business interests. I stared at him. Third-party business interests. Your business, my sister clarified softly, in case of debt or legal action. I looked at my parents. My mother was looking at her plate. My father met my eyes and then looked away. You want to protect their house, I said, from me. We want to protect the family, Gordon said. I sat back in my chair. I thought about the granola bar in the Costco parking lot. I thought about $8,000 and 5 years, and every early morning and every dog that had ever bitten me, and every booking I'd stayed up until midnight to confirm. I thought about the contract I'd signed 2 months ago with Positive Stay, a pet hotel with 4 locations across the GTA, worth just under $400,000 over 2 years. I thought about the business account I'd checked that morning, sitting at just over $160,000. I thought about the fact that I owned outright all 3 of my vans. Can I see the agreement? I asked. Gordon slid it across the table. I read it slowly. It was 4 pages. Gordon had used a template. I could tell because the formatting was inconsistent, and 2 of the clauses used American legal terminology rather than Ontario. The trust arrangement would effectively give Gordon and my sister control over my parents' assets. There was language I recognized from estate planning, not to protect my parents from my business, but to redirect their estate away from equal distribution, away from me. Gordon, I said, where did you get this template? He blinked. I had a colleague look it over. A colleague, not a lawyer. He's in real estate law. Real estate law and estate planning are different practice areas. I set the paper down. This clause here, Section 3B, would give you and Renee signing authority over any financial decisions related to their estate. That's not a family protection agreement. That's a power of attorney. My sister shook her head. That's not what it is. It's exactly what it is. You'd have the right to manage their assets, make financial decisions on their behalf, and limit distributions without their individual consent once the trust is established. I looked at my mother. Did you read this? My mother said quietly, Gordon explained it to us. I'm sure he did. My father still hadn't said anything. I'm not signing anything, I said, and I'd strongly suggest you 2 don't either. I looked at my parents, not without an independent lawyer. Not one, Gordon knows. Gordon laughed. It was the kind of laugh designed to make you feel young and foolish. I understand you're protective, but you're running a grooming business. We're talking about significant assets here. And there it was, the real sentence, the one the whole dinner had been building toward. I'm running a grooming business. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I reached into my bag and took out my phone. I opened my banking app and turned the screen to face him. "That's my business account," I said. "As of this morning." He squinted at it. His expression did something complicated. "And this," I said, swiping to my email, "is the contract I signed in August with Positive Stay. 4 locations, 2-year term." I set the phone on the table. "I'm not in trouble, Gordon. I haven't been in trouble. Gordon, I haven't been in trouble. And my business has nothing to do with my parents' house because my business is doing fine. What you've built here is a problem that doesn't exist, so you can offer a solution that benefits you." The kitchen was very quiet. My sister said, "That's not fair." "Which part?" She opened her mouth and closed it. My mother got up and started clearing plates. It's what she does when she doesn't know what to do, she cleans. My father sat down at the table. He reached out and picked up the 4-page agreement. He read it the way he reads things, slowly, without speaking, his lips barely moving. He'd read the same way when I brought home report cards, when I showed him my first lease agreement, when I needed a co-signer for the first van. He read for a long time. Then he put it down and looked at Gordon. "This gives you control," he said, "over our house. It protects the family." "It gives you control," my father said again. He wasn't raising his voice. My father never raises his voice. He doesn't have to. This is our house. We paid for it. Your name is not on it. Gordon started to explain. My father held up one hand and Gordon stopped. "I think you should go," my father said. "Both of you, tonight." My sister looked at my mother. My mother had her back to us at the sink. She didn't turn around. "Mum," Renee said. My mother turned off the tap. "Your father said what he said." I stayed and helped dry the dishes. My father and I sat on the back step afterward with cups of tea, the way we used to when I was in high school, and he'd come home from a late shift and find me still awake. The night air was cold and clean the way only October in Ontario can be, that particular sharp smell of dead leaves and coming frost. "How long has it been going well?" he asked. "About 2 years, solidly. Before that it was okay. Now it's really okay." He nodded. "You should have told us." "You never asked," I said. And then, because it came out harsher than I meant it, I mean, it didn't come up. Everyone always assumed. He was quiet for a while. "I assumed too," he said. "I know." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said that more." I didn't answer. I just sat with it. Sometimes you wait years for 6 words, and when they come, you don't know what to do with them, except hold very still so they don't disappear. My sister called me 3 days later. Not to apologize exactly. Renee doesn't apologize directly. She circles around it. She contextualizes. She said Gordon had meant well. She said they were genuinely worried. She said the business stuff was impressive and she hadn't known. She said she and Gordon had been going through a hard year. He'd lost a listing. They'd overextended on the renovation. Things were tighter than they'd let on. "I figured," I said. She was quiet for a second. "You figured?" "You asked me to come to dinner." Gordon had a trust agreement ready to go. I've seen Gordon negotiate. He doesn't do paperwork unless there's something in it for him. I wasn't angry when I said it. I was just telling her what I knew. "You needed something. I'm sorry you're going through a hard time." But the answer wasn't to take from Mom and Dad. She started crying. Not performance crying, real crying, the kind she did when we were little and she'd actually broken something. I felt bad for her then. I did. "I don't know how you do it," she said. "You always seem like you're barely keeping it together and then you're just fine. You're always just fine." "I'm not always fine," I said. "I just don't announce it when I'm not." We didn't solve everything on that phone call. Families don't work that way. We're better now than we were. My sister and Gordon went to actual financial counseling. She mentioned it once, sideways, and I pretended not to notice, so she wouldn't feel embarrassed. My parents had an independent lawyer review their estate documents. Nothing dramatic. Just the right thing, done properly finally. My dad came out to watch me work one Saturday that winter. He sat in a folding chair in someone's driveway in Rexdale while I bathed a 70-pound golden retriever who kept trying to eat the shower head, and my dad watched with his coffee going cold in his hand, and this expression on his face I hadn't seen before. When I was done, he said, "You built this?" "Yeah," I said. "From nothing?" "From $8,000 and a lot of early mornings." He nodded slowly, like he was adding it up and arriving at a different answer than he'd expected. He drove home. I cleaned out the van and loaded the supplies for Monday and locked up. My phone buzzed on the way home. A new booking, a repeat client, her Bernese Mountain Dog Thursday at 9. I confirmed it and kept driving. The 4 season was clear that night. The lights of the city were bright against the low clouds. I had the heater going and the radio low, and I thought about the agreement Gordon had printed out on 4 pages, and how carefully he built it, how long he must have been planning it, how sure he must have been that I wouldn't know what I was reading. The thing about being underestimated is that people hand you their playbook. They show you exactly what they thought you were, which tells you exactly what they are. I was fine. I had always been fine. I just hadn't needed anyone to know that until the moment it mattered. I still think about my dad sitting on that back step with his tea going cold, asking how long things had been going well. 2 years solidly, I told him, and he nodded like he was doing math he should have done sooner. That moment stays with me because it wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no raised voices, no movie scene where someone slams a door. It was just a quiet October night in a Tobit coat, 2 people who hadn't talked honestly in years, finally doing it. And I think that's the part most people miss when something like this happens in a family. The noise gets all the attention, but the real thing, the thing that actually changes you, happens in the quiet afterward. What Gordon brought to that dinner table wasn't just a bad legal document. It was the accumulated result of every assumption he'd been allowed to make unchallenged. He'd watched me show up to family dinners and not talk about work, and he'd decided that silence meant struggle. He'd built an entire plan on top of that assumption. 4 pages, a trust structure, a dinner designed to feel like care, and it would have worked if I hadn't known what I was reading. That's the thing about people who underestimate you. They get sloppy. They stop double-checking their logic because they're so certain of your limitations. I don't hold it against him entirely. I'd been quiet for years, partly out of privacy, partly out of habit, partly because nobody had seemed particularly interested. But there's a version of that story where I stay quiet one more time, where I sit at that table, feel the shame of being spoken to like a child, and sign something I don't understand because the people I love are watching and I don't want to make a scene. That version of me would have handed over something real, and nobody would have known until it was too late. What I understand now, looking back, is that protecting yourself isn't the same as being defensive. Reading a document carefully isn't paranoia. Knowing the difference between estate planning and a power of attorney isn't arrogance. It's just something you owe yourself. I'd spent 5 years learning how to run a business, how to manage payroll, how to read a contract, how to negotiate with suppliers. I didn't learn those things to impress anyone. I learned them because they were necessary. And then, without planning it, they became the exact thing that protected my parents' house on a Saturday night in October. My sister called it impressive after, like it was a trick I'd done. I don't think she meant it dismissively. I think she genuinely hadn't known there was something to be impressed by. And that's partly on me. I'd been so careful to keep my head down, to not make claims I couldn't back up, that I'd made myself invisible in my own family. The integrity of that, not overstating what you have, not performing success you haven't earned, that still feels right to me. But I'd taken it too far. I'd let it become a kind of absence. My dad came to watch me work that winter. He sat in the cold in someone's driveway in Rexdale and watched me bathe a golden retriever, and he said, "You built this." He wasn't talking about the van or the booking system or the positive stay contract. He was talking about the whole thing, the discipline of showing up before sunrise, the patience of building something slowly, the stubbornness of not quitting when it was hard and nobody was watching. Those things, doing right by people, thinking clearly, holding on when holding on is difficult. They don't announce themselves, they accumulate. And then one day someone slides a 4-page document across a dinner table and you realize, quietly, that you were ready.